Have you ever noticed you're repeating with your child the very things your parents did to you that hurt you so much? Have you ever heard yourself saying the same words you promised you would never say? Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try to be different, something inside you reproduces the old automatic unconscious pattern? This phenomenon isn't a character flaw. It's not a lack of love. It's the generational shadow at work in your parenting, and it's shaping your child's psyche right this very moment. Most parents raise their children on the autopilot of repetition. They repeat what they learned, reproduce what they lived through, and project what they never healed. And the child, this child who was born whole, with a unique self waiting to blossom, is gradually shaped not by their own essence, but by the distorted reflection of their parents' unresolved wounds. They learn that to be loved, they must stop being who they are. They put on a mask. They bury their authenticity. And the cycle perpetuates, generation after generation, until someone has the courage to stop, look inward, and ask, what am I truly passing on to my child? Carl Jung, the pioneer of depth psychology, dedicated decades to studying the unconscious patterns that govern the human psyche. He revealed something that most people go their entire lives without realizing. We are not just the result of our conscious experiences. We are deeply influenced by unconscious content, unintegrated shadows, and complexes inherited from our parents and their parents. He discovered that the family is the first theater where archetypal dramas unfold, where the child absorbs not only what the parents say, but especially what they don't say, what they repress, what they deny in themselves. And here is the truth that few have the courage to face. The parental shadow doesn't disappear with good intentions. It doesn't dissolve because you love your child. It doesn't heal because you decided to be a better parent than yours were. The shadow operates precisely where you aren't looking. It acts in moments of stress, exhaustion, and emotional dysregulation. It manifests in your automatic reactions, your unconscious expectations, your silent projections. And the child, with their psyche still forming, absorbs all of this as the absolute truth about themselves and the world. But what Jung discovered about parental influence on child development completely changes how we understand raising children. He revealed that the parent's unconscious is the primary psychic environment where the child develops, that the parent's unresolved complexes become the seeds of the children's neuroses, that the child's individuation, the process of becoming who they truly are, depends directly on the parent's ability to recognize and integrate their own shadows, and that conscious parenting isn't about discipline techniques or educational methods, but about the brutal courage to heal one's own psyche so as not to contaminate their child's. Are you ready to face the mirror? Look at yourself now. Don't look away. Don't make excuses. Just observe with brutal honesty what you are about to recognize. How many times have you demanded that your child be strong, when in reality you are projecting your own unaccepted fragility onto them? How many times have you criticized them for being too sensitive, because you learned that feeling was a weakness, and never allowed yourself to heal that wound? How many times have you pushed them to be the best, not because they need it, but because you never felt good enough, and now they carry the weight of your inadequacy disguised as ambition? Observe the child. They are there, in front of you, desperately trying to decipher who you want them to be in order to be loved. They don't have the capacity to differentiate between what is theirs and what is your projection. They simply absorb. They record. They shape their developing personality according to the distorted mirror you are offering. And while you repeat the pattern, their true essence gets buried layer by layer, until one day they become an adult who doesn't know who they really are, only how to play the role they learned to perform to survive emotionally in their relationship with you. As long as you project the shadow, their self cannot flourish. Do you see the mechanism now? Do you see how it works? Your father was strict with you, so you swore to be permissive, but the unhealed rigidity now explodes in moments of disproportionate anger. Your mother was absent, so you became overprotective, but the unresolved fear of abandonment now suffocates your child's autonomy. You were pushed too hard, so you decided not to push at all, but the lack of structure you offer is just the other side of the same unintegrated coin. You haven't broken the pattern. You've just inverted the polarity of the same wound. And the child pays the price. Recognize the pattern. It's operating now, at this moment, in the way you react when your child cries, in the way you respond when they challenge you, in the way you feel when they fail, in the way you behave when they simply want to be themselves, and that doesn't match what you unconsciously expected. Do you recognize this pattern? It's because you inherited this wound. It was planted in you when your psyche was vulnerable and open, exactly as your child's psyche is now. Your parents weren't monsters. They were repeating it too. They were also trapped in the cycle. They also carried the unhealed shadows of their own parents. And if you don't stop now consciously with courage and brutal honesty, you will pass this same wound on. Your child will carry it, and so will their children. But you are here. You are reading this. Something inside you is already awakened. Something in you already knows it needs to be different. And today, you will understand exactly how this dynamic works in the child's brain and psyche. How parental influence sculpts not just behavior, but the deep psychic structure of a developing human being. You will understand the psychology behind the repetition, and more importantly, you will understand how to heal it. Jung's fundamental discovery about child development can be summarized like this. The child does not develop their psyche in a vacuum. They develop within the psychic field of their parents. The parental unconscious is the psychological womb where the child's personality is formed, and everything that is unresolved, unintegrated, and unconscious in the parents becomes the invisible but absolutely real environment where the child's psyche grows. Think of the child as a living mirror. In the first years of life, they do not yet have a consolidated ego, a separate identity. They exist in a state of mystical participation with their parents, absorbing everything: the non-verbalized emotions, the repressed tensions, the silenced fears, the projected desires, the unconscious expectations. They register not what you say, but who you are. Not what you consciously teach, but what you unconsciously transmit through your psychic state. When you reject parts of yourself, the child feels this rejection and internalizes that those parts are also unacceptable in them. When you are afraid of your own anger, the child learns that feeling anger is dangerous and represses this effect, creating a shadow that will later manifest in distorted ways. When you project onto your child the need to be perfect because you never felt good enough, they develop an inferiority complex masked by compulsive, perfectionistic behavior. The child's brain is literally being shaped by these interactions. Neuroscience confirms what Jung intuited. Early relational experiences sculpt neural connections, determine patterns of emotional response, and establish fundamental beliefs about oneself and the world. But Jung went beyond neuroscience. He revealed that it's not just the parent's behavior that matters, but the unconscious content behind that behavior. A mother can hug her child while unconsciously rejecting them. A father can say, "I love you," while projecting the shadow of his own inadequacy onto the child. And the child knows. On an unconscious level, they always know. They feel the incongruity. They perceive the dissonance. And to cope with it, to maintain the bond with the parents who are their source of physical and emotional survival, they make the only possible move. They bury their authenticity. They create a persona, a mask that corresponds to what the parents need them to be. They abandon the true self and build an adapted false self. This is the central mechanism of neurosis, according to Jung. It's not what happens to the child. It's what the child does with parts of themselves to remain emotionally connected to unconscious parents. They fragment, they repress, they project, they develop complexes. And all of this because the psychic environment offered by the parents was not safe enough for them to simply be who they are. The question then becomes, how do you create a healthy psychic environment? How do you stop projecting? How do you integrate your own shadow so as not to contaminate your child's psyche with it? The answer lies in what comes next. The first parental influence that shapes the child's psyche is the parent's unregulated emotional state. The child's nervous system is like an extremely sensitive antenna, constantly picking up on the parent's internal state. When you are anxious, even if you don't say a word, the child absorbs this anxiety and their own nervous system goes on high alert. When you are emotionally dysregulated, exploding in rage or sinking into sadness without the ability to contain it, the child learns that emotions are dangerous and begins to repress them so as not to further destabilize the environment. The child's brain registers. The world is unpredictable. Adults are not safe. I need to control my behavior to maintain my parents' emotional stability. This pattern becomes the basis of an emotional hyper-responsibility complex that the child will carry into adulthood. The second influence is the projection of unconscious expectations. You look at your child and see not who they are, but who you need them to be to validate something unresolved in you. Maybe you project onto them the dream you never fulfilled. Maybe you project the need to be socially admired through their achievements. Maybe you project your own fear of failure, and therefore constantly push them to be better. The child feels this projection as an existential betrayal. I am not seen for who I am, only for what I represent in my father's or mother's psyche. And to be loved, they try to meet the projection, sacrificing pieces of their essence on the altar of parental approval. The true self gets buried. The persona is built. And one day you will have a successful, obedient, admired child who is completely disconnected from who they really are. The third influence is the transmission of complexes through unconscious repetition. If you have an unresolved maternal complex, you will reproduce dynamics from your relationship with your mother in your relationship with your child. If you have a paternal complex, you will repeat your father's patterns even while swearing to be different. Complexes are like automatic programs running in the unconscious, and they are activated precisely in moments of greatest vulnerability. The child is then not just dealing with you, but with generations of unhealed patterns manifesting through you. They inherit not only your genes, but your psychic ghosts. The fourth influence is the systematic invalidation of the child's emotional experience. When they cry and you say, "It's nothing." When they're scared and you say, "There's no need to be scared." When they're angry and you say, "Nice boys don't get angry." You are teaching them that their feelings are not valid, that their internal perception is not reliable, that they need to repress what they feel to be accepted. The brain registers. My subjective experience is wrong. What I feel doesn't matter. I need to adapt to the adult's narrative. This chronic invalidation is the root of dissociation, of disconnection from the body, of the difficulty in recognizing and naming emotions in adulthood. The child learns that to survive emotionally, they must deny their own internal reality. And this fragmentation between what they feel and what they are allowed to feel is the birth of neurosis. The fifth parental influence is the absence of empathetic mirroring. The child needs to be seen, not judged, not corrected, not molded, but genuinely seen and reflected back with presence and acceptance. When you are constantly distracted, when you listen to your child but aren't really present, when you look at them but are mentally somewhere else, the unconscious message they receive is, "I am not important enough to capture my parents' attention. I am not worthy of their full presence." The child's brain interprets emotional absence as rejection, and to cope with this pain, the child may become hyperactive, constantly trying to get attention, or they may withdraw completely, giving up on being seen and building an isolated inner world where they no longer need the other. Both strategies are adaptations to an environment where empathetic mirroring has failed. The sixth influence is conditioning through conditional love. When the child only receives affection, approval, and validation when they behave in a certain way, when they achieve something, when they meet expectations, they develop the core belief: I am only lovable when I perform, when I produce, when I am the way others want me to be. Their value becomes dependent on external factors. They lose touch with their sense of intrinsic worth, and this leads to a lifetime of seeking validation outside, trying to prove they deserve love, never feeling good enough because their worth was never internal. It was always conditioned on what they did, not who they were. You are raising a child who may have external success, but will be emotionally empty inside. The seventh influence is the unconscious prohibition of individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, of integrating all parts of the psyche, of differentiating yourself from collective and family patterns. But many parents, without realizing it, sabotage this process because the child's individuation threatens the parental ego. When your child starts to have their own opinions and you feel disrespected, when they choose a different path from what you planned and you feel rejected, when they question your values and you interpret it as betrayal, the implicit message is, you can only be who you are up to the point where it doesn't threaten my identity, my worldview, my need for control. And the child, sensing this, stops individuating. They freeze their personality development. They remain psychologically fused with their parents, even in adulthood, because separating would mean losing love. The eighth and most profound influence is the transference of the unintegrated parental shadow. Everything you reject in yourself, you project onto your child. If you repressed your creativity, you will criticize them when they are too creative. If you denied your healthy aggression, you will punish them when they show assertiveness. If you buried your vulnerability, You will shame them when they cry. The child becomes the repository for your shadow. And the most tragic part, they begin to believe that these parts of them are truly bad, unacceptable, wrong. They internalize your rejection as the truth about themselves, and they spend the rest of their lives trying to eradicate from themselves the very things that would make them whole. This is the heaviest legacy of unconscious parenting. You not only pass on your wounds, you make the child believe that the wounds are their own defects. Now that you've recognized the 8 influences, the urgent question is, how do you break these patterns? How do you heal your own shadow so as not to project it onto your child? How do you become the kind of parent who allows for the child's healthy individuation instead of unconsciously repeating the same generational mistakes? The answer begins with a radical practice of self-inquiry. You need to do the shadow work, not as a theoretical concept, but as a daily, honest, and if necessary, painful practice. Get a journal, set aside a moment of silence, and start asking the questions you've been avoiding your whole life. Ask, what part of myself do I reject most strongly? Is it my anger? My sadness? My need to be seen? My vulnerability? My imperfection? And then observe. When my child manifests this exact part, how do I react? Do I repress in them what I repress in myself? Do I criticize in them what I can't tolerate in myself? Do I shame in them what I've denied in myself? Write down your answers without a filter, without justifications, without rationalization, just the naked truth. Because it's only in brutal honesty that integration begins. Ask, what did I need to hear as a child that I never heard? Maybe you needed to hear that you were enough even without achieving anything. Maybe you needed to hear that your feelings were valid. Maybe you needed to be seen without having to perform. Now realize, are you giving this to your child or are you repeating the lack? Are you offering what you didn't receive or are you demanding from them what no one gave to you? The practice continues with conscious observation. Every time you react disproportionately to your child's behavior, stop, breathe, and ask, is this reaction about them or is it about me? This trigger they've activated, where does it come from? What is being touched inside of me? You will often discover that the intense reaction has nothing to do with the child. It has to do with your own wound being poked. And when you recognize this, you lift the burden of carrying your shadow off the child. Practice radical presence. Not just being physically present, but emotionally available. When your child talks to you, stop what you're doing. Look them in the eye. Listen not just to the words, but to what's behind them. Reflect back what you perceive. You seem sad. You sound frustrated. You look excited. Validate their emotional experience without trying to fix it, without trying to change it, without trying to teach them to feel differently. Just acknowledge, I see you. I'm here. What you feel matters. And finally, have the humility to ask for help. Jungian therapy, deep analysis, group work focused on family patterns. You cannot see your own shadow alone. You need an external mirror, someone to point out your blind spots, to show you the patterns you don't see. Conscious parenting is not an individual achievement. It's a continuous process of awakening that requires the courage to look inward repeatedly, to recognize where you are still unconscious, to integrate what has been rejected. Are you willing to do this work? You can no longer unsee what you've seen. You can no longer return to the comfortable unconsciousness of automatic repetition. Something has changed in you by absorbing this message. You now carry the knowledge that your unconscious patterns are shaping your child's psyche right this very moment. And with this knowledge comes the responsibility to act. You are now the conscious observer of your own story. You are no longer just the product of your upbringing. You are the possibility of breaking the cycle. You are the generation that chooses to heal instead of repeat. You are the loving presence that allows your child's essence to flourish without the distortions of your own unintegrated shadow. Acknowledge the courage it took to get here. Acknowledge the pain that was activated by facing the mirror. Acknowledge that you are not perfect and never will be, but that perfection is not the goal. The goal is consciousness. The goal is presence. The goal is to create a psychic environment where the child can individuate, where they can become who they really are, without having to sacrifice pieces of their soul to be loved. Your child doesn't need a perfect parent. They need a human, real parent who acknowledges their flaws, who apologizes when they project, who makes amends when they hurt, who is committed to their own psychological growth. This is the greatest inheritance you can leave. Not the absence of mistakes, but the ability to look at them, to integrate them, to transform them. The journey of conscious parenting has no end. There is no finish line where you've finally mastered everything and never repeat patterns again. There will be days when you fail. There will be moments when the shadow emerges and you react unconsciously. But the difference now is that you will have awareness. You will notice. You will take responsibility. And you will use every failure as an opportunity for greater integration, greater healing, and greater presence. Comment below which of the 8 influences impacted you the most. Which one did you recognize operating in your own parenting? What wound are you willing to start healing today? The community forming here is one of courageous parents who have chosen to awaken, and your sharing could be the very mirror someone else needs to recognize their own pattern. Like this video if you felt the courage to look at your parental shadow without looking away. If you recognize that the change starts with you, not with your child's behavior. If you are committed to the journey of integration to provide a healthy psychic field where the next generation can flourish. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of conscious parenting, grounded in depth psychology. In upcoming videos, we will explore how to work with specific complexes, how to repair wounds that have already been caused, how to dialogue with the inner child, and how to create rituals of presence and connection. The journey is just beginning. Let your child flourish. Start by healing yourself.